Welcome everyone. Today I'm joined by a very special guest on Mr. Adams' Community of Practice. We'll be talking about grouping learners and interaction patterns. Hi Corinne.
Hi.
Before we get started, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Corinne Leukes and I've been a teacher and trainer for around 20 years. I started off teaching English in my home country, South Africa, and I've worked predominantly in Asia and Africa since then. I've been in Sudan for nearly 4 years now.
Interesting. So you're typically Sudanese now?
Yes.
All right.
Seems like it.
Okay. So let's get it started. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the meaning of grouping learners? What do we mean by grouping learners?
Well, when we group learners, we make sure that our students are not working alone. It's the way that we put them together in our English language classroom. So we might ask 2 students to work together. We might ask groups of students to work together.
But why do we do so?
Well,
why do we group learners?
There are a lot of reasons for that. The main reason in our classrooms is so that our students have somebody to talk to. So it maximizes their speaking time. They're talking to each other about the task and hopefully discussing something to do with it. They could be using language from the lesson or incidental language. But there are other reasons why we might group our learners. It could increase their confidence because lots of people are shy speaking in a foreign language in front of a big group of people. So speaking to just one other student in English might be a good idea. It also helps students work on their problem-solving skills, and it can really motivate them when they're doing tasks.
So I can group my learners if I want to improve my CLT, the communicative language teaching.
Oh, absolutely.
And if
you
I want to
should
promote
be.
students'
Oh,
confidence.
you have to. You have to.
Interesting. Are there several ways of grouping learners, or is it just one way of putting your learners into 2 groups? Or
No, there are lots of different ways. I mean, you've just touched on it yourself. You might ask your students to work in pairs, and then you might put those 2 pairs together to form a small group. You might divide your class in 2 and have 2 big groups. You might have your class working together as one big group.
Okay.
So there are a lot of different ways in which you can group your learners. You really need to think of the aim, not only of your task, but also of your lesson, and make sure that you vary the way that you group your learners throughout a lesson.
Interesting, will do. And now, what's the difference between grouping learners and interaction patterns? Are they the same thing, or?
Oh, they're in the same category. You could say that grouping is kind of a subset of interaction patterns. Interaction patterns are the way we think about who's talking to whom or who's working with whom. So is it the teacher talking to a single student?
Okay.
Is it a group of students speaking to another group of students? So you can see that group work is part of this, but it's not the whole story when it comes to interaction patterns.
Yes.
And in the same way that we should vary groups, we should also vary interaction patterns. If the teacher is talking to the students all the time, that's not a good lesson.
Yes.
You want different people to be able to talk together
instead of teaching.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So I can say that interaction patterns are inclusive to grouping learners, not the other way around.
Well, I think that grouping learners is a
Part of it.
of interaction patterns. Yeah.
Nice. So what interaction patterns teachers need to consider when planning for a lesson?
Well,
you just gave us a couple of examples. Can you just elaborate on that?
Well, I mean, I think as teachers, it's easier for us to think about ourselves. So we think about the teacher to a single student, the teacher to the whole class, teacher to a group of students. But remember, it can also be the other way around. It can be a student to a student. It can be a small group of students to another group of students. You could have a student take on your role as teacher or leader, and it could be a group of students, the whole class, in fact, with one single student. So there are lots and lots of different ways that we can think about interaction patterns.
Nice. So for us as teachers, do we have to stick to one interaction pattern throughout the lesson?
Oh, absolutely not. As we were saying earlier on, the bigger the variety, the better. I think what we need to be careful of is not having a certain type of interaction simply for the sake of having it. You know, if you've got a class who are not necessarily used to your way of doing things, don't make the student the teacher the first time round. You know, it's okay to stick to pair work, group work, whole class, pair work, group work, whole class in the beginning, and then later on bring in more interesting and exciting ways of your students interacting with each other.
To avoid boredom, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
So this would take me to this point where we need to discuss, what do we have to consider when deciding on grouping learners? What about the aim of the lesson? What has it got to do with this?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the aim is vital, and everything we do as teachers, it goes back to that aim. So if the aim of your lesson is writing,
Okay.
then at some stage there will be an emphasis on individual work. And you need to bear that in mind, that sometimes it's unnatural to group students for certain tasks. Students can't read together.
Yes.
They have to read
On my own
individually.
pace.
Yeah. They can find answers together, they can check answers together, but the actual process
cannot
of
read
reading
together.
the text,
Yes.
they don't do that together. So it's really important to think about the aim of your lesson. What are you actually trying to teach? Other things that you should think about is who you're grouping together. If you've got 3 very strong students and 1 weak student in a group, what do you think is going to happen?
One of them will be dominant, of course.
Yeah, and how about that weak student? What do you think that person is going to do?
Nothing.
Not that much, yeah. So we do need to think about how we group students, and if you know your students well, personality can come into this as well.
Yes.
I mean, imagine you've got the class clown next to the quietest person in the class.
It's not
How do you
fair.
think? How do you think that quiet person?
Wouldn't be fair to that quiet person, yes.
Yeah, and maybe the class clown may feel pressure to perform even when he or she is weaker at the skill that you're practicing. So it's important to think about who you're going to pair. Often when we think about abilities, we think about strong, and weak. Now, it's okay to sometimes mix that up,
Strong, weak.
but you should know how the stronger student is going to support that weaker student.
It's got to be clear. Interesting.
Yeah.
What about the learner's previous experience? You talked about it just now.
Students are sometimes unfamiliar with what they need to do when they're working in groups, and as a teacher you may need to model and demonstrate what you expect from them, depending on the task that they're doing. So remember, at the beginning everybody is new, whatever their ability, and they may not know how to do certain tasks when they're working in groups. Things that you can do to improve the situation are, as I said, demonstrating to students what you're going to do. Take a student and show them how to do the task with their partner if it's a pair work activity, or get 2 or 3 students to show everybody in the group what you want them to do.
Yeah,
and that can really help.
And do you think the chosen activity is a major factor to deciding on which type of interaction pattern we need to pick?
It does, as does what you want to achieve with your learners by the end of the lesson. So, as I mentioned earlier on, it really does depend on the aim of the lesson, and also therefore the specific task that you're doing at that point in time. So, for example, if you've got an interview situation, a bit like what we're doing, would that work with a big group of students, do you think?
Not really.
No. What kind of grouping do you think would work better?
Of course, pair work.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, it's often very clear from the real life situation what kind of interaction pattern you're going to have.
So we've got to really relate to real life experience, real life situations, because that's where they're going to practice their English speaking skills.
Absolutely, I agree with you. That's a really good way of thinking of it.
All right, to conclude, why do you think teachers are not really into grouping learners? What could be the reason from your personal experience?
Well, I think some teachers feel like they lose control when the students are not focused on them. But remember, they are the ones who are there to learn. And it's okay for things to be a bit noisy sometimes, and for there to be a little bit of chaos. But as a teacher, you should have the techniques to be able to bring your students back to the task and to get them back on track with what you want them to do.
And it's a language class after all. It's got to be noisy.
Yeah, there has to be some
You
noise.
need to get them talking.
I mean, if you're really worried about things like that, there are other ways that you can have your control. Like you can control how long the students speak for, so that your chaos is not sustained.
Yes.
Especially if you've got young learners, that is something you need to think about. You can say to students, you've got 2 minutes for this task, and then you're going to change partners. So by
And it
varying
would be helpful if you put up the timer so that they can see.
Oh, absolutely. So classroom management obviously feeds into everything that we do, and that could be a good way to help you balance your interaction patterns in your class. But I think the benefits of including group work, pair work, and varying our interaction patterns, they really outweigh any of these issues that come up in the classroom.
Yeah, interesting. If we have full understanding.
I hope so.
Thank you very much, Corinne. Thank you, everyone. If you like the video, then hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to leave your comment down below in the comment section. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We are together, 3 of us together, and we are together. Which act of kindness was the most impressive to you, and why? Share your thoughts with your partners. Alright? Let's get started. Lesson, a piece of paper. Pick your piece of paper, don't show it to your friend, just read it and keep it with you. Now everybody now stand up. Taking your chairs, don't forget, taking your chair. Look at your paper and find your partner. Look at your paper and find your partner. Find the person who's got the similar items. Move around the classroom. Freeze! Now you need to talk to the person next to you. And here we are together. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Number 1, sit here. Number 2, come sit here.